Did you know that in addition to UFO sightings, people in North America have been reporting seeing mysterious creatures, flying orbs of light, and other strange, unexplainable beings? Incidents of these cryptid sightings have been increasing year after year. Many times, at the same time, UFO sightings have been reported. And since the 60s, if you saw one of these in the Pennsylvania area, you'd report them to today's guest. He's one of the pioneering investigators of cryptid UFO and Bigfoot sightings and the former director of MUFON, the Mutual UFO Network. He's been featured on the Discovery Channel, History Channel, Sci-Fi Network, and was a frequent guest on the famous Coast to Coast radio show. He's got multiple books, a documentary, and still gives lectures across the country. Here's my conversation with the one and only Stan Gordon. I really appreciate you joining today. Exciting topic. You've had a hotline where people could call in and report strange sightings since 1969 in Pennsylvania. You've got numerous books on your investigations, which involve UFOs, Bigfoot, cryptids. Now, I want to know one thing. Are you surprised at all about how mainstream this subject has gone since you started?
Oh, yeah, things have changed dramatically. Back when I was starting back I started in 1959 as a young kid interested in science and electronics, and I've been out in the field since 1965 after the incident happened near Kecksburg, Pennsylvania. And back in those days, there was a lot more ridicule than there is today. But even today, 90% of the witnesses, more than that, probably 99% of the witnesses that call in that have these experiences, they still want no publicity whatsoever, because so many of these people, they have respectable jobs, some are first responders, and so they're reluctant to publicly talk about it, but at least they're willing to call in and share. But a lot of them want to find out if other people have reported something similar or on the same time period.
And you know what? Now, I'd like to know, since you've been doing this so long, and the audience should know too, that you get thousands and thousands of these reports every year, right?
Well, I can't say thousands every year, but I've investigated many thousands of reports, thousands of UFO cases, and hundreds of Bigfoot and cryptid cases. So when we talk about a cryptid, Bigfoot is considered a cryptid. It's a creature that people report seeing, but which science has never confirmed existing.
Okay, now that's a really interesting one because I'm glad that you mentioned the cryptid thing, because people know UFOs, people know Bigfoot, but now these cryptids. When you describe a cryptid, because the audience that's going to be listening to, they're very very they're unfamiliar with the topic. So it's a great topic, and it's great to have you on because you're definitely the expert to explain some of these things. So when you're saying some cryptids, what are some of the stranger cryptids that you have heard of? Or I should say more popular ones.
Well, I'd say probably, of course, Bigfoot is the most popular, and the reporter every year in Pennsylvania. We have sightings reported every year. I can tell you in the last couple of years, many of the Bigfoot reports from widespread areas of Pennsylvania have been in daylight where people were 50, 60 feet away from these creatures. So they're very, very detailed reports. And there have been some, if you saw some of the pictures I sent on the synopsis I just did on 2024 sightings in Pennsylvania, which is on my website. There's some very interesting tracks that have been showing up, casts were made, and so these things go on year after year. But one of the interesting cryptid would be what we call Thunderbird sightings. And this goes back, of course, to the Native Americans. It's not just Pennsylvania, but all across the country. I've investigated many. There was a surge of these reports last year across many parts of Pennsylvania. Many of these, again, were daylight at low level, but these are these huge, oversized flying creatures that are very interesting, very unusual. And quite a lot of these people were very familiar with the wildlife of Pennsylvania. They knew blue heron, they know turkey vultures, they knew eagles, and what they saw, you're talking wingspans of 10 to 20 feet. A lot of them last year around, estimated about 12 to over 20 feet. And some of the descriptions are unlike what we know of the species of birds that are seen in Pennsylvania and around the country. And some reports are very, very unusual. We have different categories of them. Some look like this huge, oversized vultures in some cases. There's another category. It's more like a huge, leathery-skinned, featherless, like a huge black bat. That's been pretty common. And then there's some people, and again, these are very, very credible witnesses. I mean, it's amazing the backgrounds of some of these people who swear they've seen something that looks prehistoric, like a pterodactyl or pterotorn. And these reports going year after year, and again, it's not just PA, it's all across the country and around the world. And, you know, I interviewed two people who are basically bird experts. They spent their lives studying birds, and both of them in two different, one in Pennsylvania, one in another part of the country, and they were literally in shock because they knew this was their studies. They knew what birds looked like and what they saw. I remember the one person that saw one up here in southwest PA several years ago in the afternoon. When he saw this thing coming across the sky, he thought it was first a piper cub until it started flapping its wings. And he told me he was just in shock. He could not believe that something like that could exist.
Now, this is one of the more interesting ones. I'm glad you brought up the Thunderbird because that's the one I saw in your report, and that's the one that kind of got me really interested because I've never heard of this before. Now, is this one of those that you've heard consistently through the years? You mentioned Native Americans reported sightings of this. Have the reports been consistent since the 60s, since you've been investigating this?
Oh, yeah, there definitely is. And again, reports come in. Almost every year we get reports. This year we had a little, or I should say last year, 2024, we had a surge of some really interesting reports. Again, nobody knew about these because I published no information on the sightings till long after these things occurred. So these other people had no way of knowing other people reporting these sightings, and it was very interesting. And I mean, it's over the years, some of these have been very, very detailed, low-level, close range. We've had incidents where these huge flying creatures have been on the ground, on road, eating roadkill, blocking vehicles where the people in the vehicles are sitting there watching this thing. I remember one case from, I believe it was 2007. Actually, it was on the neighboring West Virginia. It was a two-lane road, and this fellow was riding down the road that morning. He had to hit his brakes because there's this huge flying creature. He said this thing was at least as tall as this vehicle, at least 4 foot tall, had a huge wingspan. It was eating roadkill and was flapping its wings, trying to get off the ground. It was so heavy he could barely get off the ground. But he could see the dust and dirt on the end of each wingtip as it's flapping its wings. He went back the next day to measure the width across the road with a wingspan. It was 21 feet across.
Oh my God. I mean, who wouldn't be terrified seeing something like that? Yeah, you know what? The first thing we got to ask, though, because what everyone's going to be thinking is if these have been, reported all these years, how come we can't find, not a single picture of one?
Well, there are some pictures out there. I do get a lot of pictures of UFOs all the time come in, game cam pictures. We do get game cam pictures, security cameras of some of these things on occasion. Here's the reason why. One, let's focus on cryptids right now. A lot of these encounters are things that people's lives have been changed. I've spoken to many hunters who spend years and years out in the woods, never saw anything unusual till that one day, and when they had their encounter with a strange creature, a Bigfoot or some others have a cryptid, they were basically in shock. I mean, I've had grown hunters talk to me face to face with tears coming out of their eyes, told me they'd never go back in the woods again. They were so frightened. And but for a lot of these instances, one, it's a matter of seconds. They see this thing lumbering through the woods, a Bigfoot. They see these things run out in front of people's cars. It's pretty common, actually, in Pennsylvania, other areas. So it happens so quickly, people are in shock, or they don't even think about taking a picture till after it happens. And then there's some even stranger elements, and if we have time, we'll get into this. There have been numerous incidents. In fact, I just had a meeting this afternoon with a PhD. It's very involved in this amount of state. He was passing through Pennsylvania, met with me. He's getting the same kind of reports where he's at that I'm getting here. And I'm in touch with many researchers around the country, and they're getting similar type of reports as well. But one of the things is these electromagnetic effects that are being reported with low-level UFO sightings and even cryptid cases where, for example, people have fully charged telephones and attempt to take a picture, and moments later their fully charged battery is completely drained to power. Or in other cases, the equipment malfunctions. We've heard this also even with some cryptid activity over more recent years. There's a lot more of this than people realize. I've learned a lot more over the years. I'm doing this now for over 65 years. I have never personally seen a Bigfoot or a UFO or a cryptid. I've seen a lot of evidence, but I've never had my own personal experience.
Now, do you think that's because, I tend to think that, maybe something to do with consciousness with these things, and maybe it's manifesting to certain people. I mean, did you notice anything like that in maybe in the similarities in the type of people that are witnessing these things? I know you've done investigations. That's one thing we should take it back a little bit. Now that people should know that you did have an investigation team for many years, right?
Oh yeah, well, starting in 19, well, after I founded my hotline in 1969, and I was overwhelmed with reports, and I realized I couldn't do this all on my own anymore. So in 1970, I founded the first of three volunteer research groups that would, for many years, would investigate incidents across Pennsylvania. The groups were kind of unique. Most involved were specialists. We had scientists, engineers, technicians, police officers, former military specialists. We all did this around our full-time jobs out of our own pockets. By 1973, I had extended to cover the whole state of Pennsylvania, and we were involved in multitudes of incidents. And we learned a lot, and I'll answer your question in a minute because it's a part of what I'll tell you. So remind me if I get sidetracked. There's so much information here we could talk about. When I got involved in these type of reports, especially with Bigfoot, I was investigating Bigfoot cases back in the 60s, and I had interviewed some people already who had seen these things, and I was convinced at that point that Bigfoot was very likely some type of unknown primate. But then things began to turn up over the years, 72, and then 1973 here in Pennsylvania, we had the biggest UFO and Bigfoot outbreak in history anywhere in the country, probably in the world. There were hundreds and hundreds of UFO sightings going all year across Pennsylvania. Many of the local newspapers were covering it. Some of the national papers were covering some of our investigations. We were really surprised because we began to get referrals from the news media and state police and law enforcement across the state were referring cases to my teams to investigate. So we're out there day and night investigating all these incidents. So you had all these UFO sightings, many in daylight, low level, not just lights in the sky, large structured objects low to the ground. There were landing reports, incidents on the turnpike. It was amazing. And then in the summer of 73, we had the biggest Bigfoot outbreak ever documented. That went on in early 74. There have been Bigfoot sightings reported every year since then. And it was amazing. But then during that time in 73, we're thinking this is some type of unknown primate, and then a lot of strange things begin to surface. One of them was the fact that my teams would get out to a location, maybe within minutes, hours after it's reported, in all types of weather, including snow. And in some cases, we had a series of footprints, large tracks with a big stride between them that would go a distance and then abruptly stop when there should have been more tracks. There was no way you could have fabricated that. That, by the way, is going all over the country now being reported. That was the first thing that made us scratch our heads to try to figure out what the heck's going on here. And then it got stranger and stranger. Then we began to see patterns. We'd have a UFO sighting in a particular area. Within minutes, hours, and days later, we'd have a Bigfoot sighting or vice versa. And then we had incredible cases where we had a UFO and Bigfoot seen together at the same time and place. And I can go into great detail and tell you some of these cases. They're long, but they're really fascinating. They've been recorded, mentioned all over the world. And that's when I began to realize that Bigfoot was much stranger than an unknown animal. And now we're learning a lot more about this, and I can tell you, as weird as it sounds, and we don't understand the science behind it, for lack of a better term, these things are interdimensional. They come in and out of our reality. They can leave evidence at times, and then they're gone. They come and they go. And that's what a lot of these other cryptids seem to be doing the same thing. It's just amazing stuff.
Now, does this seem and I want to make sure that we touch on this first too before we continue. Do you notice the similarities in the people that have actually been witnessing these things, or have you put anything together that kind of links them all? Like maybe their psychology, maybe where the background, or anything going on in their lives. Have you gone that down the rabbit hole to investigate the psychology of the actual people? Because maybe there's reasons why only
Yes.
certain people see. And what have you found?
Well, yes, and again, it's something I knew years and years ago. I've talked about this more and more. There's still a lot we don't know about these things, but one, almost anybody can be at the right place at the right time and have an encounter. Whether it's a Bigfoot, for example, a fella a couple of months ago reported a Black Panther ran out right in front of his vehicle. Just a normal guy. In fact, he didn't go public, but he was probably a public name a lot of people would know in this area. and I believe it was a few weeks later, and it's on reports on that synopsis of my paper now I put on my website. Another Black Panther sightings report in another county short time around there as well. But anyhow, anybody can be in the right place at the right time. However, I've noticed this pattern years and years ago, that there are some people who have had more than one encounter with a cryptid, a Bigfoot, a UFO, and some of them have a history of it. And in fact, it goes much deeper than that. And what I found out is that a lot of these people, when they were very young children, they had a missing time experience. Okay. And from the time they were young, a lot of them had paranormal experiences. Some of them claimed they lived in a haunted house. They had saw apparitions. As years went by, some of them would have UFO encounters, Bigfoot encounter, cryptid encounters. And then, as time went on, their children began to have experiences, and then their grandchildren. And then we find out now that some of this goes back to other generations of families. It may well be, I speculated on this many years ago, that some people may have certain abilities. They're able to perceive this phenomenon, or other people can't, or the phenomenon is attracted to them for some reason. There's so much we don't understand, but it's very, very interesting.
That's so interesting to hear. Like I said, I tend to think that it's linked something towards consciousness might link these people, and they may be more receptive to it. So it's really just like so crazy, but it makes sense why other people haven't seen it. Now, here's another question I want to ask. So when these people report seeing these things, how about what is the reaction of whatever they're looking back at them? Are they surprised that they can see, like, maybe these people have something that others don't have, and they're able to, witness these things, and maybe those creatures, cryptids, whatever they are shocked that they can be seen? Have you ever noticed something like that?
Oh, yes, I have. In fact, I mentioned
Really?
some of it in my last book, Creepy Cryptids, that it's a pattern I began to notice more and more and more recent years. While a lot of cases the creatures just walk by and just ignore the people, there's more and more incidents being reported in Pennsylvania. Again, I know from other states where people are seeing these creatures at very close range. And when these creatures realize that the humans can see them, they have a startled effect, they have a startled reaction, they have a startled look on their faces. And yes, there is a reaction. I think that's a real important clue, whatever that might mean.
Right, because maybe they're, it's like you said, they're some sort of interdimensional being, or, I mean, obviously they're, from, or maybe having some sort of cloaking. We don't know, but there's been enough of these sightings, and, I'm very interested in the cryptid thing, because, the way I stumbled upon you is I saw an interview by the guy that wrote, Skinwalkers at the Pentagon, and he had mentioned, some of your work and some of your sightings, and he said that, this was like a Native American phenomenon. Can you explain what these, a skinwalker is, and what they look like?
Well, I guess there's variations to it. I believe what they're referring to is out there in that part of Utah. The Native Americans have these legends that these things, that some of the human-like figures out there can change. A creature looks like a wolf, or other type of creatures change other creatures. But that's the kind of things we've been hearing around here for years, and in more recent years. And it's very complex. Again, a lot of the things you heard about Skinwalker Ranch, I was investigating here in 1973 and writing about it. And that's the kind of thing that's going on now. It's not just a Skinwalker Ranch. It's not just a location here in Pennsylvania. There are areas being reported all over the country now where there's ongoing phenomena like this. We have an area up here in Fayette County. Fayette County is very active here in southwest PA, and we have an area called the Chestnut Ridge. It's a mountain range that goes through Westmoreland, Fayette, and Indiana County, and extends a few miles into West Virginia. There have been sightings around there for years, but there are certain areas along that ridge, especially here in Westmoreland County and Fayette County, that are active year after year with daylight UFO sightings and balls of light low the ground and all kind of cryptid reports. And, I mean, this is right through the last few days I'm getting reports, and it just never ends. And, there's definitely something going on. It's energy connected. The pattern I found years and years ago was that many close-range, low-level UFO sightings, or as the government calls them now, UAP, And many encounters with Bigfoot and other cryptids often occur in the vicinity of energy sources. We have many instances around power plants, high-tension power lines, gas wells, gas lines, all kind of radio communication towers, bodies of water, railroad tracks. It goes on and on and on. Definitely an energy connection, a lot of what we're dealing with. And that seems to also show up again with these electromagnetic effects being reported. For example, something very few people are aware of, but these reports go on. We have incidents where a Bigfoot walks out in front of a car, and when the creature's nearby, the car begins to sputter and lose power, and when the creature walks away, the power comes back on. And that's very similar over many, many years of low-level UFO incidents where there's power outages in vehicles. And if you go back through my website, you'll see a very detailed report from this past July, 11 o'clock in the morning, beautiful morning, on a major highway here in southwest PA in Fayette County, Route 119, where two cars were driving down the road. Both of the cars stalled out at the same time as a very large wingless cylindrical object passed overhead low.
Wow. So these things are obviously connected to the UFO phenomena. We don't know if they're all the same thing, or if these are different species of these different types of UFOs, or whatever they are. I mean,
I've said. Go ahead. You cut out on me. Go ahead.
I was gonna say. Do you think that it's strange at all that these things that are being reported are always some sort of humanoid? You know, they talk about like the Bigfoot. You know, they got the gray aliens. You have now people say these skinwalkers, these dog type creatures that look almost like human. Do you think that's strange? That, you know, why do these things keep on having like a sort of a human bipedal configuration?
Okay, well, I think I'm talking about the so-called Dogman reports, which we've had here in Pennsylvania for years and years ago, and we still get them in more recent years. But there's some similarities, and I'm going to tell you a couple of these cases from the Bigfoot thing, which indicated to me that Bigfoot was not a normal flesh and blood animal, it was something much stranger. And then I'll show you how it relates to another cryptid case, for example. These things have a tendency of a physical and a non-physical component to it. They appear and they disappear. They can leave evidence at times, and that's why there's no bodies. And I mentioned to you about the tracks, but I'll tell you about an incident during that massive wave of 74. It was February 6, 1974, way up deep in the mountains of Fayette County. Some of your listeners will remember the time period. There was a big national trucker strike across the country. There was gas rationing. Most people remember the gas rationing, so I couldn't get gas locally to get up to the scene to the next morning. There was also violence on the highways across some states. So here in Pennsylvania, the National Guard and the state police were patrolling together. You had members of both units that responded to this incident. That evening, here's a person in a little cabin home deep in the mountains, lived there for years and years, knows animals well, pretty much not afraid of anything. And she was watching TV a normal evening when she heard a commotion on her little front porch of her cabin home. Something was knocking. There was some empty soda cans out there, and something was knocking the soda cans around. So, I believe it was a couple weeks before, she had reported there was a pack of wild dogs that came through. So she thought, I bet those dogs are back. So I'll grab my 16-gauge double-barrel shotgun, and I'll load one chamber and shoot overhead and scare those dogs away, which is what she proceeded to do. She loads one chamber of her shotgun. She walks up towards the front door. She turns on the switch to put the outside porch light on. She opens up the door and steps out. But there's no dogs out there. 6 feet in front of her is a 7-foot-tall, hair-covered, gray-haired Bigfoot that put its arm straight up over its head when she turned the light on. How did she react? She pulled the trigger and fired right into it. She said there was this bright flash of light, like the flash on a strobe or a flash on a camera, and that huge creature vanished and disappeared right in front of her. But it gets better. Her in-laws lived about 100 feet away. They heard the gunshot and called over and asked what she was shooting at. She tried to explain to him. Her son-in-law grabbed his sidearm, started walking down that dirt road, and apparently at some point he reportedly was surrounded by 4 or 5 hairy people with eyes like coals of fire, started shooting at him randomly, ran back into the house, the cabin, and about the same time there's this large luminous object hovering over the trees at the same time. That's when they called the state police for help. And I talked to the investigating officer, and he said by the time they found it, that location way up in the mountains, everything was over. But he said something definitely unusual happened there. He said, one, the witnesses were physically very shaken. They were very upset, but they gave a detailed account. The animals on the farm were acting very nervous and unusual, but he said what really convinced him were the dogs. He had several very big dogs. I think one was an Eskimo Spitz, a German Shepherd. He said when they arrived on scene, dogs wouldn't bark or make a sound. They wouldn't move. And that's something that's very, very common with even the most ferocious dogs when they're close to a Bigfoot. Other animals also react, but that was very common. But that was the case among others that showed up during that time, and since then, they indicated we're dealing with something that is not a physical animal. And then, if you want me to, I'll go into another kind of cryptid or out of place animal and show you a case that's similarly with similar type of an account reported.
Yeah. Let's go into that, but first I want to ask a little more details on this case that you said. Now, they said that they shot into it and she was pretty close. Did she talk about the way it smelled? They mentioned the eyes. Is there anything physical that we can kind of get a gauge that this thing was physically there and not just maybe some sort of, manifestation that they're seeing,
Well, the interesting thing is, one, she fired into it again with her shotgun. When we got out there and searched one of the animal officers the next day, we found the whole BB pattern in the trees right in line with where she had shot at and went right through it. And but that was it. I mean, there was no smell. And that's something else, too. A lot of these TV shows, they indicate a Bigfoot. You only see him at night. You have to have night vision. There's always a terrible odor. First of all, one, not true. You have many Bigfoot sightings in daylight. And like I said, in more recent years in Pennsylvania, we're getting more reports at close range in daylight. And two, quite often there's no unusual smell whatsoever. In some cases, there's a horrific smell. A lot of people describe it like sulfur, rotten eggs, something that's been dead for a long time. But in other cases, there's no odor whatsoever.
But they do say that they've got these glowing eyes.
Not in all cases. I mean, okay. I've had cases where people have been close to them. They have very, very dark eyes. But in some cases, the eyes appear to be self-luminescent, glowing. And there's we're not talking about incidents where there's moonlight, artificial lighting, some type of reflection, like eye shine you would see on a rabbit or deer at night. This is completely different. I've talked to many hunters who have seen this. I've talked to hunters who are close to a Bigfoot in the dark. And interestingly, the eyes were glowing, but when the creatures would turn its head, it would go from a bright green to a bright red and back to a bright green as it's moving its head.
Oh, wow. That'll scare you away. That'll get you running. Well, what about as far as communication goes? The people say with these with other alien encounters, they have some sort of telepathic communication. Have you ever had that? Are there any similarities in that regard to actual intelligence?
Yep, I'm familiar with that as well. And I ran into these cases years ago. It's very rare in Pennsylvania. These cases seem to be more common out in the western part of the country for whatever reason. But we have had a small number of incidents where people reluctantly told me that they believe these creatures were trying to telepathically communicate with them. And it's fascinating. And I can tell you this, I was involved in an incident on the scene with a witness when that witness told me this creature was communicating with them at that time. So here's the story. This was back in the 80s. This in the area, again, along that Chestnut Ridge in Westmoreland County, where sightings have gone on for years. Some of the landowners had called my team to come out to investigate that one of these huge Bigfoot were coming down from the top of the ridge, coming down closer to their homes and scaring their animals. So my team's out there, and we have a number of landowners out there sharing their experience about the Bigfoot out there, tell us what they've been seeing. One of them in the group said to me reluctantly, they said, I don't know why, I don't understand this, but this thing seems to be trying to communicate with me at times. A short time later, she said, this creature's telling me right now that tomorrow morning, the next morning, about 15 miles away, over the town of Homer City, Pennsylvania, there's going to be a very unusual UFO incident. And lo and behold, early the next morning over Homer City, Pennsylvania, there were multiple reports of this very bizarre, loud, weird sound, like something was very low over town, but you couldn't see it. It was so unusual, they called the fire department out. It was in a local newspaper. And how do you explain that one?
Yeah. Yeah, the thing that I think about is that, since you've had so many of these instances, has the government ever reached out to you for information? Have you ever worked with them and provided the data? Have they shown that they care? Like how now we've got these task force, the UAP task force, and it looks like they're actually taking an interest in the and they're working towards maybe disclosure. So have you been contacted by any of these agencies in the past to provide them information?
Well, I can tell you yes. And that because I talked about this in my Silent Invasion book about the massive wave in '73 and all the weird things that went on. I can tell you in September of '73, when the phones in my home were ringing off the hook and all kind of reports are coming in, we're out there day and night with my teams investigating incidents. And a couple of times, actually, the phone lines in my home went dead. They went out of order because they couldn't handle all the calls coming in back in those days. Anyhow, one of the calls coming in, it was a voice, a man on the phone that said, "I work for the government. We're very interested in the investigation you're doing on the Bigfoot sightings in the area." At that time, I was getting the name of a government laboratory in Washington, D.C., the name of a contact, an address, and a phone number if we came up with a body or something along that line. I never had the time. I never had the opportunity that I needed to call them because, of course, we never came up with a body. But about 2 weeks later, I get a call from one of the congressman's office requesting a meeting. Two men from that office came to my home and spent some time with me. They were very professional, very supportive. I kept in touch with them for quite a long time. I told them about the phone call I got. I gave them the phone number, and they confirmed to me, yes, it was a government number in Washington, D.C.
Wow. But you never got the threats. You never got the "don't talk about this" or the Men in Black visit.
I have not. Have I had a few witnesses over the years of thousands of cases who had things like that happen? Yes, I've had that reported.
Wow. Okay. So that just validates more and more of what we've been hearing, that this is has been going on. Now, connect now the UFO and the Bigfoot though, because I'm like you, I always thought I was never interested in Bigfoot. I thought people are just seeing skinny bears, and they're just confusing this over time. But now you have connections, like you said before, that you're saying these Bigfoots whenever they see these UFOs. Do you have any stories of people maybe seeing a Bigfoot coming out of a UFO or closer to it? Anything like that?
Oh, yes. And probably one of the most famous cases that I was involved in and was documented, it's been written up all over the world. That's when we began to realize with this case we're dealing with something in '73 that's completely unknown to us or probably anybody else. And this is going to take a few minutes. It's a very detailed case.
Yeah.
My Silent Invasion book goes into great detail about this because we don't have time to get into great detail about a lot of these reports. I
Yeah.
remember like it happened yesterday. It was October 25th, 1973. There were multiple UFO incidents coming in on my hotline from across the state that day. But about 10:30 that night, I get a call from the state police and a state trooper from the Uniontown Barracks in Fayette County. He said, "I'm just involved in this incident." He said, "I think there's a chance something's still up in the farm. Can you get a team up here as soon as you can?" So it was 10:30 at night. It was a distance away, but we got a team together. We got our radiation equipment. We got our other equipment, found our way up to Fayette County. I'm sure we spent pretty much the whole night up there. So the basis of the story was there were about 15 people in this rural area that evening around 9 o'clock that saw this barn-sized red sphere about 100 feet off the ground hovering and slowly moving down. So this is a very large, solid object slowly moving downward. The farmer's son, in his 20s, very big fella, he's coming down the farm road to visit his family where this is taking place. He sees it, and he sees people standing outside looking at this thing. So he goes to a neighbor's house to get a better view, and it looks like it's going to land on the dad's pasture. So there was two young boys in that family. They're watching this thing, and they decide they want to go see what this thing is. So the farmer's son, the adult, and the two young kids, they decide they're going to go up there. They stop at his dad's farm first. He grabs a 30-06, which he knows is a high-powered weapon, a handful of ammunition. Did not realize at the time he had two tracer bullets in that ammo. So when you fire those tracer bullets, you just get that luminous trail. They'll start riding down the farm road. Dogs around the area going crazy. They hear this loud, high-pitched whining noise and these baby crying sounds. They're getting louder and louder as they get closer to the pasture area. They park their vehicle on an angle and they let the headlights on. They see their path, but they notice something odd. Looks like something's draining the power from the headlights. They had never seen that before. So they make their way up to the top of the pasture, and they're standing there in amazement. About 250 feet away is this huge object landed on the ground or right above it. But now it's not a complete sphere. It's like a half a sphere, like a big white dome that's illuminating the area and making this loud whining noise. So they're standing there studying this string, trying to figure out what it is. And then their attention is drawn about 75 feet away to a barbed wire fence. And along that barbed wire fence are these two huge hair-covered Bigfoot creatures walking one behind the other. The one in front's about 8 feet tall. The one behind's about 7 feet tall. They're walking upright, but they're kind of moving in a stooped fashion. They have large, glowing green eyes. They have no neck. The arms are so long they're hanging below the knees almost to the ground. And they're making these whining, crying noises. The one young kid's so frightened he ran out of the field. The other kid starts yelling to the adult, shoot him, shoot him. The guy takes his first shot. He fires over their head. That turned out to be a tracer bullet. He fires the second shot, which was a second tracer. But when he fires that second shot, the largest of the two creatures makes a loud whining noise, reaches out as though to grab that tracer, and that huge object in the field disappears. It doesn't take off. It just vanishes. Most of the luminosity is gone, and the sound stops. The creatures turn around, start walking back along the fence line towards the woods. At that point, he's firing live ammo from his .30-06 into the creatures with no response whatsoever, and apparently they were not hurt whatsoever. They run back to their truck, go to the farmhouse, told the family what happened, took them to a neighbor's and called the state police. When the state trooper arrived 45 minutes later, they went up in the field. I'm giving the short part of the story. There's a lot of other little details I'm not going to put in right now. The state trooper told me when he got on the scene where the object had been on the ground, that whole area was self-luminescent and glowing, about 100 feet or more in diameter. He said the farm animals would not go into it, and he said if he had a newspaper, he was quite certain he could read the newspaper from the light coming off the glow. I was told they went back to the barracks. Both the trooper and the wizard were taken to two separate rooms. They were separately interviewed. Then they called me to send up my team. That's the short part of the story. It got a lot stranger as the night goes on. I can tell you, it's one of the strangest cases ever documented. A famous psychiatrist, Dr. Berthold Schwartz from New Jersey at the time, spent a whole week up here interviewing all the people involved, went away completely convinced everybody was telling the truth. That was the case that we now knew that we're dealing with something that's highly unusual. And again, I'm not suggesting these things are from another planet or extraterrestrial. I don't think what most of these reports, that's what they are. Again, we're dealing with something we don't scientifically understand. For lack of a better term, we'll call it interdimensional right now.
They may be from the earth or something, right? They've got to be somehow, maybe they're related to us somehow, right? Because, why are they always bipedal? It kind of doesn't make sense. If it would be from another planet, why is it standing on two legs?
Well, again, there's so much we don't understand, but I don't think, I said a long time ago, from the cases I was looking into, I think there's more than one origin to the unknown category, the UFO mystery. I think a small percentage of some of these sightings could be extraterrestrial. Do I think the government has recovered some of those objects? Yes, I do. That's another whole long story for another program, or it's much more involved we have time to talk about, I know, today. But anyhow, I think, again, we're dealing with a lot of these UFO reports, even the ones the military is talking about. They call them Tic Tacs. I've been investigating them since the 70s. Last few years, we've had many of these sightings in daylight, beautiful afternoons hovering over populated areas around here. We have quite a lot of photographs of them from different areas you can find on my website. But that's these long, cylindrical, metallic-looking, wingless objects just hovering on beautiful days and just vanishing. But I have other instances where these things suddenly appear and disappear. They change physical form, and that's what we're hearing with even some of the cryptid reports. I'm telling you, it's all part of the same thing. It's so unusual, and nobody understands it.
Now, is there anything that makes you think that some of these may be ours? Because you've been seeing them for years. Have you noticed, like you talk about the Tic Tac looking one? This is one we start to hear about a lot. That maybe these are made by Lockheed Martin or Raytheon or one of the or Skunk Works, and that's why the people are seeing them more often. Is there anything that leads you to believe that some of these are not they're not all UAPs? They're really kind of maybe our version of them?
Well, I can tell you this from the time I started investigating in the field in the 60s and ever since then, many, many UFO sightings are misidentification of natural man-made objects. There's a lot of misidentifications. See, a lot of people even now in this time of the year in nice clear nights are seeing the planet Venus and Jupiter, the atmospheric conditions to make them get brighter and dimmer and look like they're moving around. We've had a lot of reports over the last years of Starlink satellites and other satellites, reentry of space debris on occasion, fireball meteors, meteorological phenomena. There's a lot of things we can track down and explain, and that's what I always try to do, and we always did for years. We always look for explanations and try to figure out there was an explanation before we said something is unusual or unexplainable. So many sightings every year are explainable, even cryptid reports. With Bigfoot, there's been misidentification of large bear in Pennsylvania. We've had hunters in camouflage outfits. We've had big shaggy dogs reported as a Bigfoot. So you can explain some of those. But many of the reports we get are very detailed, very close range, animal responses. Really, we've made many casts of footprints, and there's definitely something out there. And again, there's so much more to this, and we wouldn't even have time to begin to even talk about.
Now, what do you think about that? So you said before, like that this thing that the lady couldn't shoot this, and they tried shooting it and it went right through them. So, but when people say that these things are, they've got a cast of a Bigfoot foot, it doesn't seem strange that this would come out of a UFO and not have shoes or something. Why does the thing
Well,
be
we're not
walking around
saying
barefoot?
and again, we're not saying that these things have come out of a UFO. That's very, very rare. And once again, these reports are they're so unusual, so strange. Let me get you to another area where I'll show you how this is somehow connected. Since the 60s, I've been investigating what I've called mini UFOs. You're starting to hear more TV shows, and you've heard Skinwalker Ranch. You may have even heard Lou Elizondo talking about this in his recent book, Imminent, where he talks about in his home, his family has experienced these small orbs of light or balls of light. I've been investigating them for years and years. This is probably one of the most important part of the UFO mystery a lot of people don't know about. I'm dealing with them for a long time. These sightings are being reported more and more, but these objects are generally spherical, but not always. Most of them are spherical, range in size generally around a golf ball to a baseball or a foot or two in diameter. Some are bigger, some are smaller. Generally light sources of different colors. In some cases, I've had these things approach people in daylight, and they look metallic and solid, but generally light sources. Over the years, I've had reports of these things following vehicles. I've had them enter people's homes and cars through open windows. I've had them go right through walls of homes. Now you're getting reports of these things appearing inside of people's houses. In the last few years, in beautiful days, we've had these things come up 2 or 3 feet away from people in daylight. The other thing is, in Pennsylvania and all over the country now, and you can talk to many Bigfoot researchers that didn't believe it until they saw these things themselves, in areas where you have a history of Bigfoot sightings, many witnesses and researchers are now seeing these small spheres of light come very low to the ground and come within a few feet of people. So there's a connection there as well.
Have you ever heard now anyone getting hurt by these things?
Are you talking about the balls of light now?
These orbs. Yeah, because this is something, and people could look at this up too. There's one that they took a picture of at the Heathrow Airport a couple months ago, and then last month I know there was a local news network there in New Jersey that videotaped one very good shot of it in the middle of the air. Thing looked like a ball of electricity, insane looking. So have you ever heard of someone being affected physically by these things?
I'm aware of cases from around the country. They're not that well known, and yes, I have cases of physiological effects. Now, I can't say they're serious. I've heard different things. We're looking into these cases more and more, but I'll give you some examples. In 2022, when we had that big surge of these orb cases here in Pennsylvania. In October of 2022, up in Fayette County, one of my research associates investigated this case. It was around 6 o'clock in the morning. It was very cold, and this man's wife found him sound asleep on the outside porch in his pajamas, which he would never do. When she finally got him awakened, he said he was going out to get the newspaper bin delivered, and as he's walking outside, this small white sphere was hovering right near him. He got very close to it, and he said he got so tired all of a sudden he couldn't stay awake, and he fell asleep. I think it was 3 days later, up near Ligonier, PA, which is now, it's between the Chestnut Ridge and the Laurel Ridge, which are all very active areas for cryptids, UFOs, Bigfoot, balls of light from many people, including incidents in the last couple of days coming in. And anyhow, this woman was awakened around 2:30 in the morning to go to the restroom. She gets up, she goes to the bathroom, comes out 5 feet away in her living room. It's just around 1.5 feet, 2 foot diameter, dark blue sphere with a dark mass inside of it moving around. She said, I remember taking one step towards it. I felt like a slight electrical jolt. And then she said, I got so tired I couldn't stay awake. Said the next day she felt very sickly, very weak. And she said, I am an insomniac. I don't fall asleep like that. She had no explanation why she would fall asleep after she saw the object. She had two very similar type of reports.
Wow. Now, let me ask you, are you like a religious person at all?
Sure I do. I'm a definite believer in God.
Okay. So now when you hear of this stuff, like from that perspective, do you think that maybe these things are like when people reported seeing angels and demons and things like that, do you think that these things, may have some sort of connection to that? Because you hear of this person just, falling asleep, being hit by this blue light, it kind of sounds like something out of the Bible.
Well, again, there's a lot of variations in reports. Everybody has their own theories and ideas and interpretation of what they're doing with. I've talked to many people. In fact, I'm in touch with many ministers and people with different religions. Some of them, in fact, have been deeply involved in this quietly themselves, investigating these cases. And, who am I to say what this is or is not? I don't know. We're dealing with phenomena. I try to look at it scientifically. There's other people in the religious field that believe these things could be demonic, and who knows? There's some things that are very strange that people are discussing and reporting, but there are some similarities in some of these cases, and until we really know more, it's a very, very big mystery what's happening.
Well, I would definitely like to know like how it is the follow-ups with some of these people that been hit with one of these orbs, and like the person that you mentioned was a couple years back. I mean, do you ever do follow-ups and see how they are today? How did this affect them psychologically? Maybe they have telepathic ability or some other sensitivity to perception, or now maybe they're seeing cryptids. Or have you ever done follow-up like that to see if what happens long term to these people?
Yeah, I've been in touch with some of the other researchers that I know are in touch with some of these people. And in some cases, it's a one-time experience, and others, people have had other orb experiences. And again, some of these people have had cryptid and UFO experiences as well. And I'll give you another fascinating thing. I've told you about the Chestnut Ridge. There are quite a number of individuals. None of these people know each other. And I said many times in some of the lectures I've given that if I could take 10 of these people who don't know each other, tell them to go into a room and write down like 10 things that happened in their lives, when they came out, you would think it's almost the same person. The experiences, the things that go on in their lives, what they've encountered, or their kids and whatever. And up in the Chestnut Ridge, probably I'm just estimating now, last 10 to 20 years, I find out that quite a lot of these people either lived in that area or people have moved from other areas into that area they don't know why, but that's where they ended up moving to. And some of these people are just miles apart, don't know each other. And on occasion, the last couple of years, when they're having the experience, some of these people will independently call me, not knowing the other people reporting the similar things.
That is really interesting. So some of them actually, it's like the area drew them in.
Oh, yeah. And many of these people, witnesses, will tell me that they're in their home, and all of a sudden they have this strong feeling that either they have to wake up and go outside or just go outside, and then they have a UFO sighting, for example. And some of these people have had some pretty good pictures taken.
Wow. I don't know if I'm jealous of these people or I should feel lucky that I'm not one of them. Like, why haven't I been chosen yet? I'm staring out the window and I never see anything out there. So, it's really unique. Do you ever get jealous of them?
You know, I don't know if there's a reason or not that I haven't seen any of these things. Everything I've seen, I can identify. And I've heard so many reports, but it keeps me open-minded and skeptical because while I know I can explain a lot of incidents, there's also many incidents going on all the time, year after year, that are very difficult to explain away.
All right. Well, hopefully me and you'll both see one day. But, what do you think now about the UAP thing that's happening in New Jersey and now everywhere? Did you also see more sightings during the UAP, during the drone phenomena that's been happening since, about the beginning of January or late December?
Well, I was involved in it right from the beginning because I was getting reports in Pennsylvania long before you heard about it on the news. And now, once again, I'm very familiar with drone sightings because when they first came out, and there were a lot of hobbyists out there, but I had contact with some of the FAA licensed drone operators when that first came out, and I was going out with them so I could learn the technology and learn how these things were able to maneuver. So I got used to those reports, and yes, we are getting some of these drone reports. But again, we do get drone reports. I get them year after year. People are seeing these things reported as UFOs. But as this was hitting in the news from different states, a lot of people are going outside to look. And I looked at a lot of the photographs and videos I saw, and a lot of them, again, were misidentification of drones or aircraft. But some of the reports I've heard from good sources indicate that some of these incidents were much more unusual than the hobbyist type of drones. Some were these very, very large ones where you had large number of these objects for a long period of time in the same area. And we've heard some reports of some unusual possible electromagnetic effects involved. I'm hoping to get more detailed information on that. But I do believe that while you could explain a lot of those reports, some of these sightings in many different states were pretty unusual. But at the same time, all this is going on, I'm still regularly receiving regular UFO reports coming in that were completely different and more unusual. So I've been doing these things year after year. All last year was nonstop, 2024, all year long with UFO reports. Many in daylight, many at night. I received many pictures. I saw many videos. So I was receiving numerous UFO reports or UAP reports while all these other sightings are going on as well. I think we're dealing with more than one thing. I think, one, yes, there are a lot of misidentifications. Two, there was something to some of the mystery drone reports around the country, and there was other UFO activity also taking place.
So it's a lot of things happening at the same time that could be, confusing people. Now,
Yeah.
what does your gut tell you? Because you're telling me you're seeing more of these over the years. So it seems to be every year more and more of these UFO cryptid sightings are occurring. Now, what does your gut tell you is going to happen? Do you feel something like that, this is something bad is going to happen, or do you feel like there's maybe people are just getting better at spotting these things now? Like, what does this tell you? You've been doing this so long, you must kind of get a feel of, um, when the increase happens. Like, what's your reaction?
Well, again, going back so many years, every year, all year round, all kind of weather, we would get UFO reports and cryptid reports. And it varies year to year. I mean, yeah, you maybe get a few Bigfoot sightings one year, and some years you get a lot more. And it changes. I mean, back in the 60s, we were getting a lot of large, solid, metallic, huge objects low the ground. There were landing reports or alleged sightings of UFO occupants being reported and humanoids. And the 70s were very, very active. But I can just tell you this, while you get these reports, and it varies year to year, since 2021, October 2021, here in Pennsylvania, generally in the wintertime, you always get a decrease in reports because of the cold and the snow. But in October 2021, we had an increase in low-level UFO incidents, not lights in the sky, large solid objects, very low to the ground, very detailed reports. And those reports and then sightings of cryptids, they continue through 2022, 2023, all through 2024, and it's already going on in 2025. It's been nonstop all year round and all kind of weather. We're already getting reports in 2025 of things going on. So here's what's going on. You're getting more quality reports. Daylight, low-level UFO incidents. You're getting more detailed cryptid, Bigfoot incidents, other kind of reports. Last year we had Black Panther sightings. We had Thunderbird sightings. We had other type of cryptids weird things being reported. Lots of UFO sightings. And the quality of the reports in the last few years is increasing more and more. I'm talking to other researchers around the country, and a lot of them are talking to me that they're getting similar type of reports. So I don't think anybody knows what is about to happen. I can just tell you that there seems to be an increase in the kind of reports you cannot easily dismiss.
It makes you think maybe there's something that we're doing, maybe industrialization or something, or who knows what, some sort of technology change that's attracting these things in. Maybe it's 5G. Who knows?
That's right. But here's the thing. It's also interesting. Most people think about Bigfoot sightings and these cryptid sightings in wooded, forested areas. We're getting more and more reports over the years and more recent over in populated areas and suburbs of populated areas where there's not a lot of woods around.
Well, the second we start seeing them here in LA, I'm moving. All right. Fires are one thing. I can handle the fires, but I can't handle seeing a Bigfoot if I can't throw something at him. Let me ask you this, because I heard you tell one story, and I'd love if you could tell it too, because I know this is another creepy one, but I heard you tell a story about like a Bigfoot tracks in the snow that somehow they disappear.
Yeah, I think I mentioned that to you earlier, but yeah, that's one of the first things we found in the 70s, where we go out even in snow, and there are these very large, unusual footprints with big strides that go and then abruptly just stop when there should be more tracks. And that's the first thing, like, what in the heck is going on? One of my favorite cases with a Bigfoot is a witness unfortunately, he and his wife are now deceased. This was in September of 73 when all these Bigfoot sightings were going on. He was a retired coal miner. His name was, we'll pass on that. I have to think about that for a second. But anyhow, he was a retired coal miner who did not believe in Bigfoot at all. And he and his wife and neighbors were on their porch that evening laughing at the newspaper stories about the Bigfoot sightings around that area going on. So that night, it was around 4:30 in the morning, he hears this big bang against his mobile home, and he thought somebody was breaking into the garage behind his house where he had a nice antique car there. His name, by the way, was Chester. Just had one of those mind freezes for a second. His name was Chester. So Chester looks out the window. He couldn't believe what he was seeing. So he's on one side of the window. The patio's on the other side, standing directly on the opposite side of the window, so maybe a foot, 2 feet away from it at the most, with its back towards him, looking at the neighbor's house, is its 8.5 to 9 foot tall, hair covered Bigfoot. He can see this thing. He cannot believe what he's seeing. And so he leaves the lights out, and he goes over and wakes his wife. He said, that thing they call Bigfoot, it's on our patio. So anyhow, she gets up, oh my God, what are we going to do? So that was the good old days when we had real telephones. Remember the dial phones and operators? So they start walking into the room with the phone. They bump into the wall, which may scare them away. He dials O for operator, and the operator gets on. He says, that thing they call Bigfoot, it's here at my house. She connects him to the state police in Greensburg. And I believe within about half an hour, they had 6 troopers out there, 3 cars and 6 troopers. I heard the radio call go out, and I heard the dispatcher saying to keep the information off the air once the troopers got there. And anyhow, when the state police got there, they called me to come out to the scene as well. And Chester, one of the things Chester said to me was, he was so shaken by the experience that he and his wife packed their clothes. I think they left there for 2 weeks. When he came back, he went on, I believe, Pittsburgh television and some radio shows with me, telling people, he said, you never would have convinced me till I saw it myself. But here's the interesting thing. He had cut the grass that evening. So you had You had a trail of footprints in the wet grass going across his yard, across the patio, and down the road. A couple of the troopers followed the tracks for a distance, but at one point, the track suddenly abruptly ended. And he says to me, he said, I don't understand how these tracks could stop like that. He said, do these things fly? And I always thought that was an interesting comment.
Flying Bigfoots. That's all we need. We've got enough dealing with Thunderbirds now. We don't need flying Bigfoots and on top of the drones. So did anybody ever report these things coming in their house?
Say it again?
Has anyone ever reported these things entering, or is it like a vampire? They got to be invited in.
I have never had reports like that. I have had reports of these things, like hitting the side of homes, looking in windows, things like that. But I have not had them inside of people's homes. The balls of light, yes, we've had those reports inside of people's homes. But
Bigfoots are always very respectful. They knock before entering. So I think that's more clues.
But here's the other thing I was going to tell you earlier when we were talking about that case where the lady shot the Bigfoot and disappeared, and show you a similarity. One of the other kind of cryptid, out-of-place animals that we deal with all the time, including some sightings last year, very close. I've had hunters last few years in daylight see these huge black panthers in Pennsylvania. So we're talking about black panthers, we're talking about black jaguars, black leopards, animals not common in this part of the world. They've been seen in Pennsylvania for years and years. We're not talking now about mountain lions or cougars. That's something completely different. We know they've been out there for years, even though officially they've been extinct in Pennsylvania, but they see them every year as well. But the black panthers are much stranger, and they're being seen around the country in areas where they're not supposed to be. But let me tell you one story, one case that shows you the similarity between that Fayette County case and this incident, if you want to hear it.
Yeah.
Okay, so this is February 1983, getting way up in the mountains of southwest Pennsylvania. It's a very, very cold night. This guy's coming home late, and his car's overheating. So he pulls into his driveway. He goes inside, gets a can of antifreeze. He comes down and starts putting antifreeze in the car. A couple of minutes later, he hears this loud growl. So he turns around, and there's this big black house cat sitting there about 20 feet away, growling at him. He didn't think much of it because out there in the country there's a lot of cats roaming around. He goes back to putting more antifreeze in the car. A few minutes later, he hears a louder growl, and he said, I couldn't believe what I'm seeing. That big house cat has now physically grown to twice its size. He threw the can at it. The thing started growling real loud, and it turned around, started walking outside up the driveway where it's all lit up. He goes into his house to get his pistol. He comes back out a few minutes later, and he said, then I really thought I was losing my mind. He said, what I'm seeing now, that big cat that grew twice the size now looks like an animal I saw in the zoo. It looks like a full-size black panther with a long, swishy tail with glowing yellow eyes growling at me. He said, I took a shot at it. I don't know if I hit it. Moments later, it vanished right in front of me and was gone.
Wow. Half these stories, it's like you just wish they were true. I just want them to be true so badly. It sounds terrifying, but there's got to be a percentage that are maybe just hallucinations. But I love hearing the stories, and I love what you're doing over there. It's fantastic.
Let me tell you, we spent a lot of time on these investigations. I had all kinds of specialists in my group. I had physicists. I had people in the medical field. I had forensic people. We had all these specialists. And these are cases where we believe these people are telling the truth. We don't know what it was all about. We don't understand it. Nobody understands it. But these are cases you could not dismiss. Could we explain many, many reports? Yes, we could.
Wow. Well, you know what? You're doing an amazing thing out there. I'm so glad that now finally the work that you're doing is in the mainstream, and there'll be some disclosure on this. The government come out pretty soon. But where do you want to send people to get more of your books and find out more information on the stuff that you report?
Well, my website is stangordon, GORDON.info, stangordon.info. There's contact information on there, phone number and emails they could reach me at. My books are all available at Amazon.com and BarnesandNoble.com. That's the best place to get them directly. My first book was Really Mysterious Pennsylvania, where people were physically very close to Bigfoot and UFOs. Silent Invasion is very popular. That's about that massive wave in 73 and 74 when all these weird cases with UFOs and Bigfoot showed up and paranormal and mystery men showed up. And then you have Astonishing Encounters and all kind of creature sightings. And the latest book is Creepy Cryptids and Strange UFO Encounters of Pennsylvania. And there's a lot of very weird cases and incidents in there and creatures you probably never heard of before.
Well, you know what? It was a pleasure having you on, Stan. Everyone's got to go out there and get your book. I don't know if I'm going to sleep good at night after some of the scary stories you told me, but I want to find out more. So hey, thank you so much for joining. Really was a pleasure having you on.
Thanks for having me on, and maybe we'll talk again.
Definitely. All right. Have a good one, Stan. Take care.
All right, have a good evening.